So I've been watching some clips about Amy Coney Barrett, the Supreme Court nominee, and just in the brief amount of clips that I've seen about her, her background, etc., it's hard to imagine somebody that is more inappropriate for that particular position than this particular woman, Amy Coney Barrett. Just even putting aside the people of praise and how wackadoo that is. People of praise is something Amy Coney Barrett belongs to. They speak in tongues. They refer to women as handmaidens, from what I understand. That's sort of strange enough and concerning. When I see the dark money that is behind the likes of Amy Coney Barrett and other members of the Supreme Court, I sort of think, well, why hasn't that been looked into more closely? Senator Whiteman from Rhode Island, he brought this up, and I'm going to play his explanation about this dark money. There's a couple of organizations, and they are sort of about identity scrubbing donors so that you don't know who the donor is. And of course, the Christian right, the Christian fascists have a great interest, as well as corporations, in the Supreme Court nominees. Corporations like Christian fascists because they see them as useful idiots. And you can find out more about that in this recent video I posted by Chris Hedges talking about the Christian fascists and why corporations love them. But one of the reasons is that Christian fascists are, they believe in God taking care of various things, and so they don't believe in labor laws and like. Anyway, but going on to Amy Coney Barrett, there's some disturbing details about her giving speeches to a group that it's called the ADF, and she gave a speech to that group, and that group funds is a really right-wing Christian group that believes that trans people need to be sterilized. They are completely homophobic, anti-gay, and it's sort of frightening. And I'm going to show you Al Franken talking about and questioning Amy Coney Barrett about the ADF and how it funded an organization that she was giving speeches to, and that it was very clear that the ADF was funding this organization she was giving speech to. And the other thing is that one of the questions in the recent hearing to see if she's a suitable nominee for the Supreme Court, which is a lifetime position, is whether or not she believed climate change was real. And she dodged that question. She was asked that question by Senator Kamala Harris, and she said, "I think that's a controversial thing, and it's up for it's publicly debatable at the moment, and I don't want to give an answer." That's what she said, which basically she thinks that climate change is still up for debate. So she's a science denier. I think she's probably homophobic and transphobic. I mean, she's a nightmare. And could you find anybody more inappropriate? I don't know if you could. You probably could, I'm sure. There are people that are worse than that, of course, but this is like usually lots of cases end up in the Supreme Court. And if you have and not to mention, she obviously would not want women to be able to have control over their own bodies, so she's anti-choice. I bet you she's not anti-war. All these people that are anti-choice are always going on about the sanctity of human life, like Mike Pence went on about the other day. But the likes of Mike Pence, who's also a Christian fascist, he's quite fine with the wars. He's fine with the genocide that's happening in Yemen that's been ongoing through the Obama years into Trump. They've kept it going. They're all fine with killing of brown and black people overseas in these imperialist wars, but they're all sort of this anti-choice for women and wanting to cut out abortion so that women have no control over their lives whatsoever. And, she's probably going to get through, too. This is the thing. Like the fact that she's even gotten there for this appointment says a lot. The fact that that these kinds of appointments of judges are all sort of very dodgy, and there's dark money involved in that, and that hasn't been really addressed properly. I mean, it just shows the level of corruption. The fact that she'll probably get through. What does that say about the Democratic Party? What does it say that Neil Gorsuch got through? What does it say that most of these people on there, and these lifetime ridiculous appointments? Why did why did Judge Ginsburg not just opt out when Obama asked her to, and sort of, you know what I mean? It's just sort of this lifetime appointment business is ridiculous. The whole Supreme Court thing is a scam, really. It's a sham. I'll share these 3 excerpts, which I think you'll find interesting, which just show what a nightmare she is. She's a horror story. Really, that's what I think anyway.
Barrett is a right-wing judge who once clerked for Antonin Scalia. If confirmed, Barrett will give conservatives a 6-3 majority. On Wednesday, she refused to say if she thinks climate change is happening when questioned by Democratic Senator Kamala Harris, Joe Biden's running mate.
And do you believe that climate change is happening and is threatening the air we breathe and the water we drink?
Senator, again, I was wondering where you were going with that. You have asked me a series of questions that are completely uncontroversial, like whether COVID-19 is infectious, whether smoking causes cancer, and then trying to analogize that to eliciting an opinion on me that is a very contentious matter, opinion from me that is on a very contentious matter of public debate. And I will not do that. I will not express a view on a matter of public policy, especially one that is politically controversial, because that's inconsistent with the judicial role, as I have explained.
Thank you, Judge Barrett. And you've made your point clear that you believe it's a debatable point.
During 2 days of hearings, Amy Coney Barrett repeatedly refused to answer questions about her views on abortion and the future of Roe v. Wade, despite her public record opposing reproductive rights. In 2006, Barrett signed a newspaper advertisement that stated, quote, "It's time to put an end to the barbaric legacy of Roe v. Wade and restore laws that protect the lives of unborn children," unquote. Meanwhile, Barrett is facing criticism for failing to initially disclose in her Senate filings her record of speaking to anti-choice groups at Notre Dame. Barrett has already amended her filing once after CNN uncovered evidence she gave 2 talks in 2013 to anti-abortion groups at the school. CNN has now revealed Barrett also spoke to, or at least was scheduled to speak to, an anti-choice group in 2007. Under Senate rules, Barrett is required to provide a list of all public talks she's given in her professional career. One unusual moment from Wednesday's hearing occurred when Republican Senator Tom Tillis questioned Barrett about voting in the upcoming election.
I, for one, hope that every registered voter in this country vote on November 11th. That may be a stretch goal, but do you agree with that?
Of course, yes.
For the record, Election Day is November 3rd, not November 11th.
Barrett, on the financial disclosure report that you submitted to this committee, you listed 2 payments of $2,100 each from the Alliance Defending Freedom, or ADF. ADF, for those who are not familiar with it, is a far-right group that files cases and lobbies for policies that ADF characterizes as defending religious liberty. But when you actually take a look at ADF's work, it's clear that the group's real purpose is to advance an extreme version or vision of society. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracks hate groups, describes ADF as a group that has, quote, supported the recriminalization of homosexuality in the United States and criminalization abroad. Criminalization of homosexuality. Has defended state-sanctioned sterilization of transgender people abroad. Has linked homosexuality to pedophilia and claims that a homosexual agenda will destroy Christianity and society. In addition to the lawsuits it files, ADF also runs a training program for law students and young attorneys who share its views. Professor Barrett, if my understanding is correct, the payments you received from ADF were connected to presentations you delivered at ADF's training seminars. Is that right?
Yes, I gave a 1-hour presentation on constitutional law.
Mm-hmm. And you delivered these presentations to law students participating in the Blackstone Legal Fellowship Program. Blackstone is an ADF program. Were you aware of that when you accepted their invitation to speak?
I actually wasn't aware until I received the honorarium and saw the ADF on the check, or maybe when I saw an email and saw the signature line. But yes, ADF is the organization that sponsors the Blackstone.
You weren't aware of it?
When Senator Franken, I can't remember exactly when I became aware of it. I was aware of the Blackstone program for some time.
So you were not aware when you took the gig?
By the time I spoke, I was aware.
is it your habit of accepting money from organizations without first learning what they do?
Senator, I'm invited to give a lot of talks as a law professor, and it is not, I don't know what all of ADF's policy positions are, and it has never been my practice to investigate all of the policy positions of a group that invites me to speak. And if I were invited to speak by Pol Pot or by the KKK or a group like that, I would certainly decline the invitation. But I think it's a long way from...
Well, let me just tell you this, that Blackstone's affiliation with ADF is clearly stated on its website. This is a group which calls for the sterilization of transgender people abroad.
I was not aware of that.
People will feel passionately on either side about whether physiological males who identify as females should be permitted in bathrooms, especially where there are young girls present, and we've seen all these debates. Maybe things have changed so that we should change Title IX. Maybe, those arguing in favor of this kind of transgender bathroom access are right. That's a public policy debate to have. But it does seem to strain the text of the statute to say that Title IX demands it.
Do you know what the Southern Poverty Law Center is?
I'm generally aware that the Southern Poverty Law Center fights discrimination and that they do classify some groups as hate groups.
Yeah, they track hate groups. And you spoke at an event sponsored by one of those hate groups.
Senator,
now, I question your judgment. The root word of judgment is judge.
We turn to Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. On Tuesday, he opted not to ask Judge Barrett any questions. Instead, he gave a 30-minute presentation on how right-wing groups, including the Federalist Society and Judicial Crisis Network, have used dark money to reshape the nation's judiciary. This is an excerpt.
My experience around politics is that when you find hypocrisy in the daylight, look for power in the shadows. Now, people may say, well, what does all this matter? This is a political parlor game. It's no big deal. Well, there's some pretty high stakes here that we've been talking about here on our side. And I'll tell you three of them right here. Roe versus Wade, Obergefell, and the Obamacare cases. In all cases, there's big anonymous money behind various lanes of activity. One lane of activity is through the conduit of the Federalist Society. It's managed by was managed by a guy named Leonard Leo, and it's taken over the selection of judicial nominees. How do we know that to be the case? Because Trump has said so over and over again. His White House counsel said so. So we have an anonymously funded group controlling judicial selection run by this guy, Leonard Leo. Then in another lane, we have, again, anonymous funders running through something called the Judicial Crisis Network, which is run by Carrie Severino, and it's doing PR and campaign ads for Republican judicial nominees. It got single $17 million donation in the Garland-Gorsuch contest. It got another single $17 million donation to support Kavanaugh. Somebody, perhaps the same person, spent $35 million to influence the makeup of the United States Supreme Court. Tell me that's good. And then over here, you have a whole array of legal groups, also funded by dark money, which have a different role. They bring cases to the court. They don't wind their way to the court, Your Honor. They get shoved to the court by these legal groups, many of which ask to lose below so they can get quickly to the court to get their business done there. And then they turn up in a chorus, an orchestrated chorus of amici. Now, I've had a chance to have a look at this. And I was in a case, actually, as an amicus myself, the Consumer Financial Protection Board case. And in that case, there were 11 amicus briefs filed, and every single one of them was a group funded by something called Donors Trust. Donors Trust is a gigantic identity scrubbing device for the right wing so that it says Donors Trust is the donor without whoever the real donor is. It doesn't have a business. It doesn't have a business plan. It doesn't do anything. It's just an identity scrubber. And this group here, the Bradley Foundation, funded 8 out of the 11 briefs. That seems weird to me when you have amicus briefs coming in little flotillas that are funded by the same groups but nominally separate in the court. So I actually attached this to my brief as an appendix. Center for Media and Democracy saw it, and they did better work. They went on to say which foundations funded the brief writers in that CFPB case. Here's the Bradley Foundation for $5.6 million to those groups. Here's Donors Trust, $23 million to those brief writing groups. The grand total across all the donor groups was $68 million to the groups that were filing amicus briefs, pretending that they were different groups. And it's not just in the Consumer Financial Protection Board case. You might say, well, that was just a one-off. Here's Janus, the anti-labor case that had a long trail through the court, through Friedrichs and through Knox and through other decisions. And SourceWatch and ProPublica did some work about this. Here's Donors Trust and Donors Capital Fund, and here's the Bradley Foundation, and they totaled giving $45 million to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 groups that filed amicus briefs pretending to be different groups, and both of the lawyer groups in the case. Funded by Donors Trust, funded by Bradley Foundation in Janus. This is happening over and over and over again, and it goes beyond just the briefs. It goes beyond just the amicus presentations. The Federalist Society, remember this group that is acting as the conduit and that Donald Trump has said is doing his judicial selection? They're getting money from the same foundations. From Donors Trust, $16.7 million. From the Bradley Foundation, $1.37 million. From the same group of foundations total, $33 million. So you can start to look at these and you can start to tie them together. The legal groups, all the same funders over and over again, bringing the cases and providing this orchestrated chorus of amici. This is to me, pretty big deal. I've never seen this around any court that I've ever been involved with, where there's this much dark money and this much influence being used. Here's how the Washington Post summed it up. This is a conservative activist behind-the-scenes campaign to remake the nation's courts, and it's a $250 million dark money operation. But there's another piece of it, and that is not what's ahead of us, but what's behind us. What's behind us is now 80 cases, Mr. Chairman, 80 cases under Chief Justice Roberts that have these characteristics. One, they were decided 5-4 by a bare majority. Two, the 5-4 majority was partisan in the sense that not one Democratic appointee joined the 5. I refer to that group as the Roberts 5. It changes a little bit, as with Justice Scalia's death, for instance, but there's been a steady Roberts 5 that has delivered now 80 of these decisions. And the last characteristic of them is that there is an identifiable Republican donor interest in those cases. And in every single case, that donor interest won. And it's important to look at where those cases went, because they're not about big public issues like getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, undoing Roe versus Wade, and undoing same-sex marriage. They're about power. And if you look at those 80 decisions, they fall into 4 categories over and over and over again. 1, unlimited and dark money in politics. Citizens United is the famous one, but it's continued since with McCutcheon, and we've got one coming up now. Next, knock the civil jury down. Whittle it down to a nub. The civil jury was in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, in our darn Declaration of Independence. But it's annoying to big corporate powers, because you can swagger your way as a big corporate power through Congress. You can go and tell the president you put money into to elect what to do. He'll put your stooges at the EPA. It's all great until you get to the civil jury. because they have an obligation. As you know, Judge Barrett, they have an obligation under the law to be fair to both parties, irrespective of their size. You can't bribe them. You're not allowed to. It's a crime to tamper with the jury. It's standard practice to tamper with Congress. Third, first was unlimited dark money. Second was demean and diminish the civil jury. Third is weaken regulatory agencies. A lot of this money, I'm convinced, is polluter money. The Coke Industries is a polluter. The fossil fuel industry is a polluter. Who else would be putting buckets of money into this and wanting to hide who they are behind donors' trust or other schemes? And what if you're a big polluter, what do you want? You want weak regulatory agencies. You want ones that you can box up and run over to Congress and get your friends to fix things for you in Congress. And the last thing is in politics, in voting. Why on earth the court made the decision, a factual decision, not something appellate courts are ordinarily supposed to make, as I understand it, Judge Barrett, the factual decision that nobody needed to worry about minority voters in pre-clearance states being discriminated against or that legislators would try to knock back their ability to vote. These five made that finding in Shelby County against bipartisan legislation from both houses of Congress, hugely passed on no factual record. They just decided that that was a problem that was over on no record, with no basis, because it got them to the result that we then saw. What followed? State after state after state passed voter suppression laws. One so badly targeting African Americans that the two courts said it was surgically tailored to get after minority voters. In all these areas where it's about political power for big special interests and people who want to fund campaigns and people who want to get their way through politics without actually showing up, doing it behind donors' trust and other groups, doing it through these schemes, over and over and over again, you see the same thing. 80 decisions, Judge Barrett. Something is not right around the court. And dark money has a lot to do with it. Special interests have a lot to do with it. Donors' trust and whoever's hiding behind donors' trust has a lot to do with it. And the Bradley Foundation orchestrating its amici over at the court has a lot to do with it.